Hi, everyone, and welcome to our discussion with the Annie E. Casey Foundation about innovating place-based grant making, a report which showcases findings from a new evaluation of the Foundation's strategic co-investor approach to place-based work. My name is Deepti Sood. I'm a senior consultant on the evaluation and learning team here at TCC. I'm joined today by my colleague, Raynor, the Director of Evaluation and Learning here at TCC Group, and Traci Callender-Broady, Senior Associate for the Annie E. Casey Foundation's Center for Civic Sites and Community Change. We are so excited to bring you alongside a short conversation of some key takeaways from the report. Traci, I wonder if you could just kick us off with a short summary of the work.
Of course, and thanks for having me today, Deepti. So in 2012, the Annie E. Casey Foundation launched Family-Centered Community Change to support local partnerships in 3 high-poverty neighborhoods as they developed a more integrated set of services, including housing assistance, high-quality education, and job training. And this is all to help children and families succeed together in what is known as a 2-generation approach. When the foundation launched this program, we also set out to really improve our approach to what we call place-based grant making. And rather than reinventing the wheel and duplicating local programs, we joined alongside of existing partnerships in 3 neighborhoods in Buffalo, New York, Columbus, Ohio, and San Antonio, Texas, and provided technical assistance, training, and peer learning opportunities to build upon their existing community change efforts. And that role is what we describe as the strategic co-investor.
Thanks, Traci, for the explanation. Pretty early in the project, Casey brought TCC on to evaluate that approach, right? So the new strategic co-investor approach and document some lessons learned that can be used for future work. And so our collaboration with the foundation really built on years of place-based learning that we've undertaken internally and on behalf of other clients and on the social sector. And so rather than looking just at the outcomes of the project, our 7-year evaluation really focused on the foundation itself and how it was showing up in partnership with the communities. And so the evaluation really prioritized how community partners experienced the strategic co-investor approach. The evaluation revealed lessons on sort of both the community organization side and the funder side, and saw that overall, strategic co-investing on its own doesn't eliminate power dynamics inherent in the funder-grantee relationships. But we'll get more into that in a few minutes in our conversation today. And so one of the first activities that we did as the evaluators of the approach was to really clarify the new SCI model and how it differed from other place-based approaches already out there. So we did some benchmarking of other place-based initiatives, which resulted in developing 8 core components of the strategic co-investing approach. And we organized our report around these 8 components. So the first is flexible grant funding, of which a percentage is for use at local communities' discretion. The second is a high-touch staffing approach with really significant in-person time from the foundation. The third was a non-directive relationship. So the funder really worked to defer to local discretion and things like program design and implementation of sort of a lot of the specifics of how the 2-gen work happens. The fourth is an assumption that work is done in collaboration with other investing and implementing partners. So this could be other funders, but we'll also talk about sort of like who counted as a co-investor. The fifth is the funder serving as a strategic thought partner and sounding board while also providing on-demand technical assistance that the communities wanted. The sixth was facilitating networking and learning across the community. So in this case, there were 3 and making sure that there was sort of sufficient peer learning happening across all 3. The seventh was nesting of a focused issue within an existing broader community change effort. So really making sure it wasn't a new thing happening, but it was grounded by other community change work in progress. And then the 8th component was ongoing evaluation of the investment approach and the funder's role in it.
Deepti, as you're going through these, and I'm remembering back to when we first came up with these 8 different aspects, and you know, they feel, if not obvious, maybe fairly intuitive, but each of them does represent a lesson learned and shift that Casey brought to this new approach to place-based investing from some of its prominent previous efforts, like the Making Connections program. The new model, the strategic co-investor prioritizes the flexibility of the funder-grantee relationship and programmatic contributions towards this larger community change. Traci, I want to dive into the Casey Foundation's work and our evaluation of this new approach. And as national funders often do with their all their work, is especially place-based works, one of the first steps is deciding where you're going to invest, like what's the place. And so you went through this selection process, and I'm curious why the foundation settled on the 3 cities of Buffalo, Columbus, and San Antonio for the pilot of the strategic co-investor approach with FCCC.
Yeah, that's a great question, Jared. Local organizations in these 3 cities were interested in pursuing the 2-generation initiative, which focused on 3 different areas: family economic stability, parent engagement and leadership, and then early childhood education and care. And we believe that both parents and children would have significantly better outcomes if communities were able to strengthen and combine those services instead of just using one intervention.
Was there anything, as you thought about these 3 communities, that made them, if not uniquely attractive, particularly ready for the Annie Casey Foundation to engage in as, sort of strategic co-investor partners or approaches, as you were sort of piloting this?
Yeah, the foundation thought that these 3 communities would be a good fit to come alongside of as strategic co-investors, because they had elements that have been proven important in other community-led efforts. As you mentioned, we had a long history of place-based efforts like Making Connections, which gave us quite a bit of lessons learned. And those kind of elements that we know are really important to community-led efforts are a strong backbone organization, buy-in from a really diverse array of institutions and organizations, a mix of both private and public funding sources, sustained affordable housing options, a deep commitment to resident engagement and leadership, and then the focus on data to drive results.
That's really interesting. As we think about place-based funders, obviously there's value in place. And for this initiative, the Casey Foundation picked 3 places instead of 1 to do this work. What are the advantages and disadvantages in hindsight of working in multiple locations in a single place-based strategy initiative?
Working with 3 different communities, each with different background organizations, really enabled the foundation to learn and adapt to different partnership models and leadership styles, neighborhood contexts, and needs. And at the same time, this individualized approach really challenged us to design an evaluation that accounted for the unique assets and challenges of each community. And we weren't able to compare apples to apples and really had to look at more nuanced ways to assess outcomes and progress.
Thank you.
And we talked about grantee and community readiness to participate. Flipping the tables, how ready do you think the foundation was in hindsight to really implement an approach like strategic co-investor? And anything, you would say, I think we did it again, we would do it differently.
We drew on over decades worth of lessons learned from our other major efforts in designing our plans to serve as the strategic co-investor for family-centered community change. And among the key insights that shaped how we really approached FCCC was the knowledge that building on existing and established community change initiatives led by local stakeholders with demonstrated capacity to achieve results could really lead to more effective and sustainable benefits for our children and parents. And we also knew as a funder that we wanted to show up differently. We were ready to pilot this new approach to investing in communities, one that gave us a seat at the table, but also enabled our community partners to lead the decision-making process. To answer your question about hindsight, I think that we would approach sustainability a little different with our partners. Namely, we would have provided more technical assistance and support from the beginning to proactively assess their strategic plans and identify long-term funding sources, and really ensure continuity once the grant concluded. It was especially important in both San Antonio and Buffalo, where they were both active Promise neighborhood recipients, and their funding that they were receiving from the Department of Ed was sunsetting midway through our grant period.
Yeah, and I'm sort of curious, building on that, you mentioned sustainability, right? I'm also curious, like where do you think the foundation provided the greatest value to its community partners, sort of particularly with using this strategic co-investor approach?
One of the core components of the strategic co-investor approach was providing that flexible grant funding. And I think we largely deferred to local leadership in really deciding how grant dollars would be spent in service of children and families. And we knew that the FCCC teams really knew their communities the best, and the foundation all tried to add value and support the choices that they made. This flexibility really enabled local partners to be able to cover operating costs when necessary, support their strategic planning processes, and foster cross-system learning. I think also the facilitation of peer networking and learning was also an area where we provided value to the three communities. Local partners credited our learning network as a crucial source of information, both in supporting and improving their policies and practices that led to more equitable outcomes in families, and also hearing the challenges and opportunities others were facing on the ground really led to some innovation and deeper collaboration. And then lastly, I would say that the high-touch staffing model was really an important benefit to communities. Not only did the partners have those learning opportunities, but our staff also attended those partnership meetings, really conducted regular site visits, and established relationships through all levels of the organization, and making ourselves available and spending that time in community on the ground with our grantee partners helped the foundation staff really truly understand those nuances in each community and tailor our supports as needed.
I'm listening acutely, Traci, to see which ones you pick, which of the 8 indicators you pick and which you don't. You mentioned flexible funding, but you didn't mention sort of the flip side of that, which is the strategic co-investor component of a non-directive approach. Inherent in flexible funding is that you need to give the space to then use that funding. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, what would you share with other foundations about what you learned about pursuing a non-directive approach with the community partners?
While that non-directional approach is highly relational and collaborative, there are really appropriate times to lean in and really give more prescriptive guidance, particularly if you see partners that are really struggling in an area such as fund mapping, where you have a lot of robust experience. Foundations, I would say, should also consider their evaluation goals before solidifying a non-directive approach. The community-led evaluations don't always, produce the traditional outcomes that the organization may be used to. And then finally, being on the ground with communities, it truly is critical in ensuring that our partners have the resources and knowledge and capacity to really drive a successful 2-generation agenda.
Thanks, Traci. Built into the name, strategic co-investor, is the word co-investor. Could you describe who the co-investors were for FCCC and how that may have evolved over the course of the initiative?
Yeah, so in Buffalo, the primary investor and leader of Buffalo Promise Neighborhoods was M&T Bank, a nonprofit established to serve both children and families, and the primary convener of the 2-generation initiative. In Columbus, the Columbus Foundation was a primary local funder. The organization played a really instrumental role in reinvigorating the Wyland Park's housing and infrastructure. And then in San Antonio, the city's Department of Human Services provided core funding and professional development services to child care centers who served FCCC families.
Yeah, I'm struck. One of the the findings that came out of the evaluation at the end was the importance of viewing certainly these formal institutions as co-investors, but also viewing the community as a co-investor, and that they were bringing resources in various types and forms to the table, including monetary resources and in-kind donations. In many ways, the strategic co-investor approach centered the communities. The foundation was not the only funder. You gave flexible funding. You tried to use a non-directive approach, but you as a foundation were still fully present and involved. You were looking for that balance, I think, between your role and the community's role, which is sort of a tricky proposition sometimes with power dynamics and so forth. As we describe in the report, the data indicates that you often did this with good success. I wonder if you could describe a moment when you felt the foundation needed to do a better job of lifting up its own values to feel it was showing up authentically, and how you managed that as a foundation.
Yeah, that's an excellent question, Jared. I would say midway through the initiative, the KC Foundation really reassessed our approach to technical assistance, just as we asked our two-generation partners to work with families and really identify goals and customize support. We realized that we needed to do better about working with communities, leads to really truly understand their needs and tailor our technical assistance to ensure a more seamless, holistic approach, even when it came from multiple resources.
You know, it strikes me like this form of evaluation of sort of the foundation and its work is one of the core components of this strategic co-investor approach, right? It's like we can't look at our place-based work without also assessing how we are showing up in a more systematic manner. And I know we were fortunate, I can speak for you know, myself, Jared, we were joined by a colleague of ours, Kate, to really be learning partners across several years of the project. It was a lot of work, a lot of meetings, a lot of fun, and the results were sometimes what we hoped for, but you know, not always. There's a lot of learning that went into it. And I'd love if we could maybe just close out by hearing a little bit more about how the foundation chose to evaluate the work and how it sort of worked through engaging with or responding to some of the feedback it received over the 7 years.
Yeah, we did have a lot of fun, Deepti. So the beauty of the FCCC evaluation was the many expert voices and perspectives who contributed. We gained insight from community leaders and members, but also information from the Urban Institute site visits and knowledge from the technical assistance that METIS provided, and the really candid feedback from the TCC semi-annual interviews, as well as our partner Scott Hubert conducted interviews as well. And we read and processed each report with the communities and the full FCCC TA team, and really ensured that we had the space to reflect and course correct as needed across the duration of the initiative.
Traci, thank you so much for talking with us today. We appreciate the insight and perspectives you shared about the NEKC Foundation Strategic Co-Investor approach. We're so appreciative of you as a partner, you know, as we went on this journey. The 8 components and lessons learned for both communities and funders, some of which we touched on today, are examined in the new report, Innovating Place-Based Grant Making, which is available for download on our website, www.tccgrp.com. This report can serve as a useful guide for other funders who are considering supporting place-based community change work. Just to end in closing, on behalf of everyone at TCC Group, it has been a pleasure to partner with the NEKC Foundation, as well as all the other amazing partners that were part of the Family-Centered Community Change Initiative. And we have been privileged to elevate the important work that the foundation did through the strategic co-investor approach to community change. So thank you again, Traci, for being here. Thank you, all of you, for listening and joining us today, and have a good rest of your day wherever you are. Bye-bye.